The ObiWan Kenobi series last week just wrapped, and out of all the Disney Plus Star Wars shows, this was the one I was anticipating the most because it focuses on the two lead and key characters from the prequel trilogy. And when it comes to the prequel trilogy, Disney is gun-shy because they know that era of Star Wars was not universally well received until recently, when it gained more appreciation after the Star Wars regime thus far. This centers on former Jedi ObiWan Kenobi coming to terms with his failures with Anakin Skywalker and the repercussions that came with it. This show has been divisive for a lot of reasons. Kenobi has to look after Luke, and yet they bring back a 10-year-old Leia, in which I'm like, guys, come on now, do we have to keep going back to the Skywalker family? Because of that, the story is dragged on once she is kidnapped, and the story is going from point A to point B, and Kenobi bringing Leia back to Alderaan. During all this, Darth Vader and his Inquisitors are after him, which leads to the rematch of the century, which leads to the rematch of the century, and that this is one of the best lightsaber duels in years because of who was in it, the emotion between the two characters, and it was heartbreaking, and it gave closure to the two characters' failures. Ewan McGregor, Hayden Christensen are better than ever as these characters, especially Hayden in the finale. That said, it just feels like the show was really about this fight, and they had to think of a forced overarching story to get to that point. Then, of course, there's the elephant in the room, which is Moses Ingram as Reva and all the controversy around her, and which I thought that was just petty all around. In the end, I say this should have been a movie instead of a show. We could have gotten a tighter script and story. That said, I still enjoyed the Obi-Wan and Darth Vader stuff alone. I'm gonna give ObiWan Kenobi the thumbs up emoji. Hey, that rhymed. This Is Us just wrapped its final season, and I know I'm getting this up a little late, but I got a lot of things on my plate, and I wanted some time to marinate on how I feel about this season, so I can formulate how I feel about the season and the show as a whole. I was even going to do a dedicated longer video and post it on YouTube, but I thought, you know what, I'm going to just do a rapid fire, and here we go. This is without a doubt Mandy Moore's best season, and I hope she gets an Emmy. I like how they tied up Beth's story as a dancer, and Susan Kelechi Watson, who is my new celebrity crush, continued to be a bright spot on the show. I just love Randall and Beth together. Kevin has really come a long way, and yes, him and Sophie are endgame. It was always Sophie in my opinion. Uncle Nicky done got himself a black queen. They finally put some respect on Miguel. Madison was in the wrong for not letting Kevin take the kids with him for Thanksgiving. Justice for Toby. He did not do anything wrong. Kate is tripping. In my opinion, they didn't do enough to show how Kate got with her boss quite good enough. Those last couple of episodes hit me right in the feels. In the end, I'm gonna miss this show. I picked it up at a good time in my life when I was still grieving the loss of my father and was going through some other stuff at the time. So this show helped me get through some of those things. Plus, I'll even say that this is one of the best written shows that I've seen since Breaking Bad. Yeah, I said it, and you can quote me on it too. Any show that can get me to laugh, cry, and make me feel like I just went to therapy, all in the span within 1 hour for 6 seasons, I consider that a time well spent. I'm gonna give This Is Us Season 6 the hard eyes emoji, but the show as a whole, I just give it the hands up emoji because this show is a masterpiece. Thank you, Dan Fogelman. Lightyear was released in theaters over the weekend, which makes it the first movie Pixar released in a theater post-pandemic, the last being Onward. It is an in-universe movie within the Toy Story world, where we see the movie Andy saw that made him want to get a Buzz Lightyear action figure. Of course, I am a huge fan of the Toy Story franchise. Buzz Lightyear is one of my favorite characters in animation, so I was excited to hear about this film, but was also disappointed it wasn't going to be based off the Buzz Lightyear Star Command cartoon from back in the day, so this is completely new Buzz Lightyear story, but I still went into it with an open mind. Now, for the positives. However you feel about this film, you must praise the animators that worked on this film, because this is a visually stunning film, which is a little redundant to say about Pixar at this point. While nothing is ever going to make me forget Tim Allen, Chris Evans was great as the voice of Buzz Lightyear. The other voice cast includes Keke Palmer, Uzo Aduba, Peter Sohn, who plays the voice of Socks. I thought this character was gonna be annoying, but turned out to be one of the best parts, and is a cute character in itself. For the negatives, this movie is too safe. It was entertaining, but too safe. I feel like this was going to be a completely different movie, but then Pixar made them switch out the characters with Buzz Lightyear, and boom, that's your movie and it's guaranteed to make money. The film doesn't make Buzz Lightyear look like a larger-than-life character enough that Annie wanted to play with him as a toy. Zurg is in the movie, but what they do with the character, either you're going to roll with it or you're just not going to roll with it. But what they do with Zurg kind of contradicts his appearance in other movies and even the show. In the end, I was rooting for this movie, but it didn't go to infinity and beyond. But it was still fun to watch at best, and you can see the potential, so I'm going to give Lightyear the thumbs up emoji. I finally got a chance to watch Hustle, where Adam Sandler plays an international scout for the Philly 76ers and finds Bo Cruz in Spain, helps him train and get him right so that he will be drafted into the NBA. Through this, we see Stanley Sugarman, played by Adam Sandler, and Bo Cruz, played by actual NBA star Juancho Hernangomez, form a bond. Now, right off the bat, Adam Sandler is excellent in this film. Between this and Uncut Gems, Adam Sandler is on an acting renaissance right now. I think after Uncut Gems, his manager brushed off all the scripts for any shitty comedies and replaced them with dramas, or at the very least dramedies, and said, this needs to be your career from here on out. Queen Latifah plays his wife, which is an odd combination in itself, but it worked. The other thing about this film is the amount of actual basketball players in this film. But that's what happens when LeBron James is producing this film. But as somebody that doesn't really watch NBA basketball, I can tell they really put something into this film, because this film is kind of a love letter to the game of basketball in the NBA in some ways. My only gripes is that it does feel a bit generic at times. But hey, it's a sports drama, so what more can you really do? But that's what's really expected with this kind of film. I thoroughly enjoyed this film. I recommend it. It's on Netflix. Adam Sandler is once again excellent. I could hope he continues doing stuff like this, because I think this is where he shines right now and excels. I'm gonna give Hustle the heart eyes emoji. Everything Everywhere All at Once. I know, I am late watching this. I really wanted to see this in a theater, but never got a chance to. But it was released on digital recently, and now I have seen it, and I can definitely see the hype around this film. It is about a woman and her family. She is unfulfilled in life, but then her husband is being taken over by another version of himself and tells his wife that an evil entity is coming for her from another universe. So she acquires skills from different versions of herself, as well as see what her life could have been had she chosen different paths. This was one of the craziest, bonkers movies that I have seen this year. And we are about to be halfway through the year, and I'm loving every moment of it. The performances from Michelle Yeoh as Evelyn, Stephanie Hsu, James Hong, Jamie Lee Curtis, and Ke Huy Quan, who y'all remember from Goonies and playing Short Run in Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. And that's just crazy, because he disappeared from acting for a little bit to do some behind the scenes stuff, and now he is back and kicking ass. He was definitely the standout, because one moment he's a mild-mannered man, and the next moment he's a super agent. Michelle Yeoh had to take on a lot for her role as Evelyn, and she just takes it in stride. The action and effects is bonkers, given that it is basically another multiverse movie. Seriously, who would have thought that this would be a better multiverse movie than the one that everybody was anticipating more? The Daniels directed the hell out of this one and got some pretty crazy ideas, but that's what's expected from the directors of Swiss Army Man. My only gripe about this movie is that sometimes it was a little bit too much for its own good, but hey, sometimes that can make for some good replay value, which I am definitely looking forward to watching this over and over again at some point. I'm gonna give Everything Everywhere All at Once the heart eyes emoji. Emergency was recently released on Amazon Prime, and it's the story of these two best friends in college from two different backgrounds named Sean and Kunle. One of them is street smart, while the other one is book smart, but kind of a square, and by extension a little square about what it means to be a black man in America. Things go horribly wrong when they find an underage white girl passed out on their floor, and while the logical thing for them to do is to go to the police, it would not look right to the police to find a passed out underage white girl in the presence of two black college kids, given the racial climate that we do live in. We follow them and their friend Carlos as they try to navigate the night, trying to handle this situation in a way that doesn't make them look like the bad guys, while the passed out girl's older sister tracks them down and ultimately gets the wrong impression. Now, what attracted me to the film is Sabrina Carpenter, who is a rising star in herself and has been in a couple of small films here and there. So when I saw her in the trailer to this movie and saw what it was about, I was intrigued. And when I watched it, not only I was surprised with how funny it was, but the layers this film has. Solid performances from R.J. Kyler, whose career I'd had my eyes on for a long time after seeing him in movies like Me, Earl and the Dying Girl, Power Rangers, and The Harder They Fall. After this film, I think he has a bright future ahead of him. Donald Elise Watkins, who plays Kunle, is the real standout because he is the heart of the story and goes through the biggest change. He has a scene between him and R.J. Kyler's character that almost put me on the verge of tears. This is easily one of my favorite films of the year, and I highly recommend you watch it. It is on Amazon Prime. I'm gonna give Emergency the hands up emoji because it is a masterpiece. And now to the beginning of what is now the Jurassic World trilogy. I remember this came out in 2015, which was a big year for blockbusters, and it had been a decade between Jurassic movies, so of course at the time this was an example of a studio taking a once popular franchise that hadn't seen any activity for a long time but still retains a loyal fan base and trying to relaunch it. This movie split audiences. There were things people like about the movie, and there were things people didn't like about the movie. For me, I liked the movie and thought it was the best Jurassic Park movie since The Lost World. In fact, I think it's on par with The Lost World, but still not as good as the first film. But hey, what are you gonna do? The things I didn't like, of course, are the nitpicks, like how Bryce Dallas Howard outran a T-Rex in high heels. Why wouldn't Dr. Wu tell them what DNA they spliced together to make the Indominus Rex? Why didn't they just activate the shock attractors in the pterodactyls? A Jeep that has been sitting for 20 years is going to need more than just a new car battery. This idiot kid really kept going in the gyrosphere through an open gate. Why would you create a dinosaur that can camouflage? I can go on and on about the bad things in this movie and how it was even a bad idea for them to open a park, let alone even thought of using them for war. But I still enjoyed it as a B movie, and this was really the first sign that the series is never going to go back to how it was before. The T-Rex versus the Indominus Rex fight was awesome. I do like the new characters. It was just a fun watch, and humble yourself and just go along for the ride, because this is my fondest memory of my experience of seeing this movie in the theater. In fact, this was one of my favorite movies of 2015, but it's probably didn't crack my top 10 from what I remember. But anyways, I'm gonna give Jurassic World the thumbs up emoji. Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom, I would say, is the second to worst movie in the Jurassic series. Upon rewatching, I thought Fallen Kingdom was the worst, but after rewatching this and Jurassic Park 3, I have changed my tune, and I might change my tune once I see Dominion, but I will blow that bridge when we get to it. Now, don't get me wrong, because there is still so much wrong with this movie. It is my second to least favorite after all, for a number of reasons. Like, how did they open and or try to open a park not knowing that there is a volcano? And why is everybody contemplating saving them? This is God trying to correct our mistakes. And why would they try to stop that? I'm sure Ian Malcolm, played once again by Jeff Goldblum, behind the scenes was saying to the humans,
"Please tell me that you are not that stupid."
And then they really go through to make the dinosaurs as weapons for war. But anyways, I can't say I wasn't entertained while watching it. It had its fun moments, such as them trying to escape the island while the volcano was erupting. This scene hit me in the feels. Them trying to extract blood from the T-Rex while he was asleep was a good scene. The third act was kind of ruins everything, because by the end you realize that this was just a bridge movie to get to the third film, where the dinosaurs are now roaming the earth. And then they really took it a step too far in playing God by actually cloning humans. Jesus Christ. Like I said, I enjoyed myself watching this movie, but at this point, this series is like the Fast and the Furious. They took themselves seriously, and that first movie is a hit and a classic, and then everything else after that, it just got crazier and ridiculous as the series just went on. And at that point, you just accept it and humble yourself and just enjoy it for how ridiculous it's getting. I'm gonna give Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom the shoulder shrug emoji. Jurassic Park Dominion asked if dinosaurs and humans can coexist, but really it should have asked how many times can you run over somebody until they are dead, because that is how I describe the quality of these movies after that first Jurassic Park. This was one of my most anticipated movies of the year, and it turned out to disappoint me. The things I liked, well, I did enjoy the return of the legacy characters. It was a joy to watch Sam Neill, Laura Dern, and Jeff Goldblum step back into the roles of Alan Grant, Ellie Sattler, and Ian Malcolm. They did not miss a beat stepping back into these roles. I did like the dino action in the middle and at the very end. It was cool watching the old crew and the new crew interact with each other, and that's all the positives I have. This is multiple movies smashed together. It even feels like other movies with dinosaurs injected into it. The first act is Taken with dinosaurs, the second act is The Bourne Identity with dinosaurs, and the third act is just whatever sci-fi channel movie bullshit they could come up with. The plot is nonsensical and it involves locusts, which I am still trying to figure out. I thought it was gonna be a plot where the locust takes out all the dinosaurs around the world. There's less of an emphasis on the dinosaurs, which is why I'm here in the first place. They do some contradictions from the previous movie that didn't make any sense. In the end, I just found this film lacking. It's lacking in what is supposed to be the cap off of the Jurassic World trilogy. It's lacking for what's supposed to be the final Jurassic movie, but it's also lacking for just a standard Jurassic Park movie. I really hope this was the last one, because I think Jurassic Park, it had its run. We squeezed all we could out of this series. Let's put it to rest. But what will probably happen is it's just going to get put down for a decade or two or more, and then they're going to try to revitalize it again. I didn't hate this movie, but at the same time, I don't like it. This is definitely my least favorite, or fuck it, it's the worst of the series. I'm going to give Jurassic World Dominion the thumbs down emoji. E.T. the Extraterrestrial is now celebrating its 40th anniversary, and I wanted to revisit it because I hadn't watched it in years. It's my third favorite Spielberg film, 1 and 2 being Jurassic Park and The Color Purple. I just remember watching this on VHS at my grandfather's house and thought it was a charming film, and then as I got older, I appreciated it more. Now, watching with adult eyes, I appreciate it more from a narrative standpoint, acting, and visual standpoint. This is a basic kid and his pet creature story set in the 80s, and it's a classic because of it. Steven Spielberg was at the height of his powers with this one because he had put some bangers under his belt prior to this movie, and he really laid it all out for this movie. E.T., the character, is iconic in itself, and it's a cultural phenomenon. I'm gonna just cut this one short because what can I say about this classic that hasn't been said other than my experience with it? I'm gonna give E.T. the Extraterrestrial the heads up emoji because it is a masterpiece. Lilo and Stitch is celebrating 20 years, and I had to revisit this because this was a favorite of mine post the Disney Renaissance. I remember when this came out in the summer of 2002. This film set the world on fire because it came out during a time when Disney was beginning to lose their way post the Disney Renaissance. They were in their more experimental phase where they were just throwing stuff at us and whatever sticks, sticks. And Lilo and Stitch was the one that stick. It's the classic story about a kid and their pet alien. Stitch comes to Earth to Lilo, a little girl living with her older sister who is struggling to keep custody of her after their parents died some time before. And they form a new family as well as a bond. All the stuff with Lilo and Nani is where the movie was at its best and something Disney never tackled up until that point, which is about a broken family. We see how them not having parents affect them both together and personally. Stitch, on the other hand, could have been its own movie but still worked in context of all the Lilo and Nani stuff. This movie is iconic from the animation and the merchandise, the voice cast from Davy Chase, Tia Carr, Ving Rhames, David Augenstiers, R.I.P. I remember I had the soundtrack on CD. It's funny because this soundtrack had an emphasis on Elvis, and now 20 years later, we're getting an Elvis movie. But of course, the themes of family is what everybody took away from this film. Ohana means family. Family means nobody gets left behind or forgotten. This film stands the test of time with generations and has definitely earned its place in the Disney legacy, and that is definitely something that should be celebrated. I'm gonna give Lilo and Stitch the hard eyes emoji because it is for sure a masterpiece. Minority Report is celebrating 20 years, and while everybody is gushing over Top Gun Maverick, which I still haven't seen yet, I wanted to revisit this film, which is not only an underrated Tom Cruise film, but is also underrated as a Steven Spielberg film. It takes place in the year 2054, where there is a pre-crime program. 3 sidekicks, known as precogs, can see the future crimes before they even happen, so they stop the crime before it happens, which is a moral argument in itself. Things turn upside down when Tom Cruise's character sees a crime that he will commit, so he races against time to find out why he did the crime and how he can prevent it. Or maybe things are not what it seems, which sets him on a mystery that is set in the future. I remember I used to watch this on HBO and Cinemax all the time, and I enjoyed it, but watching 20 years later with adult eyes, this is a great film and aged like fine wine in terms of the story and themes. The special effects most definitely hold up. Most of the time. But the action, my favorite action scene in this movie is one that has a chase through a warehouse, and Steven Spielberg really puts his foot into making this film, which shows in this one action sequence. My eyeballs were glued to the screen when I was watching. Tom Cruise, of course, is good in the film because this is what he does. Some other notable performances from Colin Farrell, Max von Sydow, Samantha Morton, who plays the precog that is most essential. The film takes place in a futuristic Washington, D.C., which made my heart sing, given that I am a resident of the DMV. My grasp with this film, however, is that it is too long. I felt they kind of stretched this movie out a little bit in the middle, because once we get to the third act is when things really start to come together, and I felt they could have gotten to it a little bit faster, but regardless, I still enjoyed the ride getting there, and I'm going to give Minority Report the heart eyes emoji. It's been 20 years since Ted came out, and it's not only one of my favorite comedies from the past decade, but one of my favorite films from the past decade, period. I remember when this came out, I was excited because I am a fan of the show Family Guy, and I do like Seth MacFarlane's brand of humor. At times. So when I heard about this concept of a man that wished his teddy bear to life when he was a child, and they grow up together, I thought there are so many ways Seth MacFarlane can go with this, and he didn't disappoint. But at its core, it is a touching story about a man and his teddy bear and how he has to grow up in order to move on with his girlfriend. Mark Wahlberg and Seth MacFarlane are a comedic match made in heaven. Mark Wahlberg just brings this goofy sincerity that is needed to make you believe that his best friend is a talking teddy bear. Seth MacFarlane also brings just the right amount of raunchiness needed to bring this vulgar teddy bear to life, and I loved every minute of it. In fact, my favorite scene is when they are fighting in the hotel room, which is reminiscent of something I would see in Family Guy. It's funny how I watched Flash Gordon almost 2 years ago for the first time, and seeing all the Flash Gordon stuff in this movie in context of having watched that movie. This movie came out around the time when Mila Kunis was at a career high as she played her part, and it is funny considering she works with MacFarlane on Family Guy. Like I said, this film may not hold up with some audiences if you're not a fan of Seth MacFarlane's brand of humor, but if you are going to enjoy it. And if you've seen it before, I recommend you give it a rewatch because it is still just as funny as it was 10 years ago. I'm going to give Ted the heart eyes emoji. With the 30th anniversary of Batman Returns, I thought now is a good time to revisit the Burton and Schumacher era of Batman films, starting with the 1989 classic Batman, which was a huge deal back in the late 80s for a number of reasons. Not only it was the first live-action Batman movie after Adam West that not only was a commercial success, but it was also a critical success for taking the material in a more grounded and mature direction while still walking the fine line of appealing to younger audiences. Now, my personal experience with the film, I may not have a strong attachment to this Batman film like I do some of the other later Batman films. I do recognize, respect the impact this Batman film had on movies, superhero content, and pop culture in general. And rewatching with more adult eyes, I appreciate it more and more. Michael Keaton, in my opinion, is not the best Batman, but he is still up there with the greats for his more quiet and bold interpretation of the character. And it's crazy, audiences thought he couldn't pull it off, and yet it's a lesson we audiences still clearly haven't learned yet. I gained an even bigger appreciation for Jack Nicholson's Joker. Unlike the other Jokers after him, all he had was Cesar Romero to go off of, and he found a way to make the Joker his own, and it is iconic in his own right. You could tell it just came natural to him, and you could tell Jack Nicholson was clearly having fun. Tim Burton brought a good balance of maturity and fun to the material. It may not be the best Batman movie in my opinion, but it is an important Batman film because it set the precedent for what a Batman movie can be. I'm gonna give Batman 89 the hard eyes emoji. Batman Returns is now celebrating 30 years, which is the whole reason why I am doing this Burton and Schumacher Batman deep dive in the first place. After the success of Batman 89, Tim Burton was given free rein to do whatever he wanted for the second Batman film, which was both a good and a bad thing in retrospect. This film felt more of a Tim Burton film than a Batman film. This film was more darker than the first film that McDonald's and major companies pulled their toys at marketing. And understandably so, when the movie is more darker, nastier, has more sexual innuendos, and just downright bizarre. Michael Keaton does return as Batman, but we see less of him. Of course, the two standouts are the Penguin and Catwoman. Danny DeVito's Penguin was nothing like the character in the comics, but DeVito still brought his own to the character. Michelle Pfeiffer as Catwoman, I never really got why people put her on the pedestal as the best Catwoman, because she is not. It's because she was the inception of a lot of people's puberty, which is why she is put on that pedestal. She is also not like the character in the comics, but she still brought her own to the character. In the end, this is not a bad Batman movie, nor is it a good Batman movie, but I think everybody would agree that it is the most bizarre Batman movie ever made. But it's all up to you and your taste. And it was still an entertaining movie from where I was standing, even though this movie is proof that Tim Burton has never read a comic book in his life, let alone a Batman comic in his life, but he can still take Batman lore and put him in his style and interpretation. I'm gonna give Batman Returns the thumbs up emoji. Everybody would agree that Batman Forever was the beginning of the end of the Batman franchise once it was taken over by Joel Schumacher, once Tim Burton left because Warner Brothers wanted a more family-friendly take after the controversies of Batman Returns. Once Tim Burton left, so did Michael Keaton, who was replaced by Val Kilmer. Now, I could buy him as a 30-something-year-old billionaire, but as Batman, not quite, but he did do his best with the material he was given. Jim Carrey as the Riddler, I would say it's not the best interpretation of the character, all things considered, after the Batman came out earlier this year, but it's still not a completely inaccurate version of the character, unlike Tommy Lee Jones. I'd say Jim Carrey is the only one in the movie that understood the assignment and knew exactly what movie he was making. But Tommy Lee Jones would make a good Two-Face, just not the Two-Face he played in this movie. They introduced Robin in the film, and I thought, for what it's worth, they at least got his origin right. And Nicole Kidman as Meridian Chase is so-and-so with me. Really, the problem is the story and script, because it is a little scatterbrained on what it wants to focus on, and the stuff it does focus on was not well fleshed out. There was a subplot involving Bruce's parents and how he feels responsible for that, but they cut it for time. Really, a lot of the deleted scenes they could have kept in the film, but instead we get this fun cartoon starring actors doing their best with the material they were given, and directed by somebody that had little to no knowledge of Batman lore and what it means to people. But I don't want to speak too much ill will on the dead, even though I got more to say about his contributions to the Batman brand in the next review. As for Batman Forever, I will say it is still a fun movie to watch, and not the worst Batman movie ever. I still think there was some merit to this film, but some of that merit was lost because of the studio wanted a more family-friendly movie. I'm gonna give Batman Forever the thumbs up emoji, nonetheless. Batman and Robin not only killed the Batman franchise, but it also killed a genre of movies until Marvel came out a year later with Blade and so-and-so. While yes, this movie is so bad it's good. I can put this movie on with some friends and we get some drinks going and we'll just have fun roasting this movie and making fun of how ill-conceived it is. Batman/Bruce Wayne is replaced once again and played by George Clooney, which again, I can buy him as a 30-something-year-old millionaire, more than Val Kilmer at times, but his interpretation of Batman just felt like a dude in a cape and mask. Chris O'Donnell as Robin is annoying as hell. They not only changed and butchered Batgirl's origin, played by Alicia Silverstone, who was hot off of Clueless, but was not the best fit for the character. Of course, we have the villains like Arnold Schwarzenegger, which everybody and they daddy has expressed how they feel about this version of Mr. Freeze, whether it's positive, negative, or just fun. So I'm not going to beat a dead horse, but it was so bad, the ice puns were the worst. Arnold was never the best choice to play Mr. Freeze. But hey, for what it's worth, both him and Uma Thurman both understood the assignment. They both knew exactly what kind of movie they were making. The plot makes no sense if you start to think about it for more than 30 seconds. The production is so bad, the directing is so bad. I will give credit to Joel Schumacher because he at least apologized for this film. In fact, he said, and I quote, "If there's anybody out there that loved Batman Forever and went into Batman and Robin with great anticipation, if I insulted them, then I want to apologize, because that wasn't my intent. My intent was to entertain. I was the director, I was awake, so I'm not going to point any fingers and say they made me do this." Not many people apologize after they make something bad. Looking at you, Captain Kennedy. And like I said, it's still so bad, it's good, but it's still a turd. This movie was just so bad on so many fronts. I'm gonna give Batman and Robin the angry face emoji.